Hello, hello. Aha! Howdys and salutations to all y'all today. Sorry about that. Let's just see. Oh, nope, we do need that one. Sorry, today has just been a day of technical difficulties like you would not believe. Okay, there's the one. Okay. Yeah, I mean, stinking Spotify sent me what I thought was a phishing email about resetting my account password, so we almost didn't have music until I got that fixed. I don't know, house stuff, we're still dealing with paint fumes and trying to get that stuff sorted out. It's amazing how long oil paint smells bad, you know? Like, you would not believe. Let's see. No, Pinterest was actually working. And then, this wasn't a tech problem so much as it... Well, the tech problem of apparently OBS lost where the heck all my audio inputs were, so sorry about 4 minutes of silence. I was listening to music. I thought y'all were too. That's my bad. And then, last up, this wasn't a problem, but this actually was good, is I've just updated the website. I've realized if you've got social media platforms, they're kind of redundant with RSS, at least with the way we're using it, and a real stinking pain to set up. So until I can bother with a proper RSS feed, we're replacing that link on the old Sifamir site, which, by the way, y'all should all check out if you want. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Definitely not sponsored. I mean, it's me. I'm literally not sponsored. But it's here. We've got a website with all the information and such. You can join the Discord. We've got Mastodon, which I need to update again. All the YouTube VODs, obviously Twitch. The Pinterest, which I recommend if you want to see all the references we use. Every character we've done in the last month, we've got the references on Pinterest. And for Miquella, I've got a collection over there too. I've got some poses that, I mean, they're not bad, but I don't know what Twitch's TOS is. They're clothed. Like, it's not like it's something... We're a family-friendly stream, dagnabbit. I'm not directing y'all towards, like, graphic things. But just in case, because I don't know where Twitch draws the line, if you want to find any of the references, they'll be over on the Pinterest. And then Art Fight, of course, because that's coming up ominously soon. I've got 2 conventions I'm going to, not as, like, a tabler, but just as a fun... Me just going as a... See, I was going to say guest, but that also implies you were invited. Attendee? I bought tickets. It's fun. So I'll be busy for the next couple of weekends, which unfortunately means the Sunday streams will be even more unreliable than usual. And, sorry for them being so unreliable. As it turns out, 8 AM on a Sunday is a hard deadline for me to meet. On a good week, it's great. I really do love it. It's a great time to stream. But that does depend on me being asleep at not 5 AM the day before. It's been a weird couple weeks. Not bad weeks, just weird. But yeah, so Art Fight, which again, if y'all don't remember, we've got Art Fight on here. We've got some of the drawings from last year, which I'm sure already feel super cringy by distance, but like style approach has changed, my whole art drawing process has changed. Everything's different. This was a fun one. Wanli. That was... Whose character is this? This was Sakura. Sakura was fun. I was happy with... The original character for that one's adorable, and then Sakura did a counter-attack with Salt that is just the absolute cutest. Just painfully adorable. The Art Fight's a lot of fun. We've got the old Salt character sheet, which, my word, I've got to update that. Holy cow. Yeah, I feel like my art standards have gone up. Or at least changed. My goals with art have changed. Jeepers. I know I was going for lineless, but those nose and mouth are so janky. Oh boy. Still, it was a starting point. We learned a lot about color. We practiced actually making a character in different poses that's consistent, which was a feat in and of itself we hadn't done. I don't regret doing it. I don't regret my past art. But, like, man, I think we can do better now. Speaking of doing better, to get us back on track, where we left off was Miquella, and where we're going to be for a while, because of all the weird holidays and nonsense, is still Miquella. Yeah, it's going to be Miquella Mania May, and probably June. Hopefully not July, because I think by the time July gets here, it's Art Fight. When is... That's the wrong button. Well, sure, whatever. Art Fight. When? I always right-click on my browser to, like, open, and, like, it's so easy to accidentally hit the wrong one here. It literally doesn't matter. July 1st? Okay. Jeepers, yeah. Cool. So July 1st, art fight. We've got 1 month to prep and to hopefully finish Miquella. So, in the name of doing that, well, my setup's a little weird. I've been cleaning, again, because of the painting and stuff. We've had to resituate stuff. It's just about done. The painting part's done. Most of the stuff is dried, and it's settled back in. We just need to get back into our normal routines and, like, I don't know, clean up old brushes and rulers and junk lying around. And also install a wall fixture light. But that's not actually that hard. Normally. Apparently the wiring in our house is a little bit funky wonky. And by that, I mean the wires are supposed to have very clear color coding about power in, ground, and in some cases power out. The wrong ones are powered. And the wall box is not standard size, apparently, so the bolts from the... Not only does the fixture's, like, mount not line up with the bolt holes, but even if it did, the bolts don't fit into it. So it's gonna be an adventure. I tell you, on these projects, the last little finishing touch takes the longest, because it just runs into the weirdest hiccups. Okay. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. So, to pick up where we left off, because we've got work and stuff what we want to do. Well, besides the fact that I've got some other activities we're gonna have to try. I'm gonna have to announce those in the Discord before. We may actually have our first, like, stream or, like, viewer participation event. It depends a lot on how responsible people can be. This is definitely one of those things where someone ruins it, then nobody gets to play anymore. But I may have a fun activity where we can all draw on stream, which would be just a stinking blast. And some fun games you can play with that. So we'll see. We'll get some drawing exercises and ideas going. I've got plans on the Discord if we can ever get the time. I'm slipping into an accent here, and I don't know where it's from because that's not my native one. My word. Cool. Well, in any case, we're just gonna run with it until we have to stop. I have a bad habit from D&D that I realized. It's that once I slip into an accent, it's hard for me to get out of it. Like it takes conscious effort, and this one's just kind of fun, so I'm not really gonna like boot out. Let's just lean into it. Really, like, all in on this. And to that end, I think that now I reckon this ain't the best voice out there. You can certainly do better, much better southern accents than this one. However, ain't gonna stop me. And as y'all probably know from my other streams, saying reckon and ain't is not part of this accent. That's just a thing I do. So to that end, let's look where we left off, because I think it was a nasty restart, possibly. Worth it, though. So we'll see. Because as we saw with Art Fight, when you leave something long enough and you practice, you get better, and you start to see what all was wrong with it. And we left this one too long. It was March. It's May now, and we've done a lot of like actual practice between that time. And I don't know that I could even bear to finish what we started. Maybe, but like, don't get me wrong. We're keeping the concept. We're keeping some things, but there's so much more we can do to make it better. So, first off, recaps from the notes from last time, which were scrambled down rapidly, but my word, I'm glad we did, because I wouldn't remember squat about this. I wrote it down in my to-do app, too, and that's the only reason I'm familiar with them. First off, we had those excellent videos. I linked to them in the last YouTube VOD, if you want. And they were the face mask and skull orb methods. Really, really helpful. And also, some tips about getting the face... There's kind of two things, and they go hand in hand with art, and like, you know, they're both important, and I mix them up all the stinking time. One of them's proportion, and one of them's perspective, and it's real stinking hard to isolate one of them from the other. But in this particular case, it was very clearly a perspective problem. And I think this accent's just kind of died. I don't know what's happening, but it don't sound good no more, so I'm just gonna try to consciously get out of it, and see if we can get back to normal talking. Whew, okay. Oh, dearie, I almost slipped into another silly one. Okay, let's lean into this a little more. Maybe a little more enthusiasm, a little more actual voice, eh? So, first off, face mask and skull orb method. We got the video VOD. The VOD on YouTube has the links to the channel where I got that inspiration from, and I can't vouch for the channel. It's the only video I've seen on there, but like, I like this method. I like this way of thinking about it. It helps me... I think the biggest thing, it helps me keep the chin not like buried into the neck. And it also, I don't know, it's just another way to think about the face, and sometimes you need to refresh on the face, because face be complicated. I'm also going to turn the music down just a hair. I'm going to turn it back up for y'all. Don't get me wrong. There you go. Hopefully that sounds about the same as what it did before. But for me it was kind of deafening, so I turned down the volume on mine and then picked up the desktop audio capture. You know, I gotta say, when I first tried OBS, it seemed stinking, like, opaque and horrible, and I couldn't figure out all the different, like, anything. Like, even the window capture stuff was, like, admittedly not the most intuitive. But, like, I gotta say, it's a pretty dang good tool for an open source free streaming platform. Pardon me. That is mighty fine. I'm still slipping into the accent a bit, aren't I? Well, in any case. Let's see. Second tip. That was another tip for the face. We'll get back to that later. Drawing eyes with the eyelids. And the final tip, that little one hiding in white down below. The most important of all for where we left off, and the thing that's going to make this project a right challenge. Redo the whole thing with a corrected perspective. Yup. I think the proportions on Miquella are fine. However, the perspective, A, completely kills the tone of what we were going for. It looks like we're standing up on the other side of a table, not laying down being sacrificed. And, more importantly, like, the perspective on the head was just, like, not great compared to the rest of the body. There wasn't really a consistent, like... The perspective wasn't consistent. We didn't establish a horizon line, and we didn't align anything to where that should be. So it was just kind of a mess. And, like... I don't know what to say other than we gotta fix that. But the other thing that I realized, because I was going back and forth, I was like, well, you know, we could just try to finish it. We go in, we clean it up, we make things look spick and span. People won't notice that too much. And truth be told, I think it would have been fine. Except there's one other problem, and I should have done it separately from composition. And I kind of tried to, but I didn't search the right things, and I didn't think about it the right way at the time in March. That pose is stinking stiff still. I put so much time and energy into trying to make it a dramatic pose that fit the composition, and it, like, I mean, okay, we've got the dude here. Ignore the dude here, but, like, yeah, we've got nice contrast. Yeah, it's in motion. Yeah, the blade is highlighted. Yes, like, I mean, so much stuff here could work, but, like, this is not an exciting angle. This looks like the shoulders aren't really twisted. Like, the fabric twists, but the shoulders themselves don't. We can do better. And so the combination of the perspective was bad and the pose was really, really awkward. I think it's a justification to have another go. But I promise you, we will not spend like 5 episodes on composition this time. We already know what we want that to look like. Thinking we can fix it. We can fix this in much less time. I'm confident. I'm just looking for one more book, so I've got a reference on one question real quick. Make sure I do the horizon lines right, and then I'll be right back. Nation to Tafango. Where on earth did I put that? Ooh, I have too many. Aha! Aha! Got it. Okay, and I think I bookmarked the page. There we go. Vanishing points. There's one sneaky little thing that a lot of perspective drawings, like, when you're learning perspective, it doesn't always get covered well. And it's that not every object in the scene needs to have the same vanishing point, so long as the vanishing points are all on the same horizon line. We'll get to that when we're dealing with the face and torso and stuff, but, like, they can be angled differently as long as, like, the perspective still vanishes to the right eye level. Let's see. That helps a lot. Otherwise, everything looks like a Minecraft house, where, like, every single thing is blocked and aligned in the same axis as every single other thing. Let's see. Right. Okay, cool. The Norling Perspective Made Easy. It's an old book, but dagnab, is it a quick read and still really helpful. I mean, sure, the copyright's 1937, but it's not like physics of how perspective work has changed. And, like, it's a very quick read. It's got good ideas, straightforward explanations. Highly recommend. I like it a lot, like, not just because I'd studied perspective and stuff before. Like, that's one of the few things we actually did cover in the old art classes that was sketching related, because I took some art classes in high school. But mostly we were doing stuff like calligraphy and, I don't know, decoupage and sculpture and things like that. A lot of fun, not necessarily applicable to sketching, but we did cover perspective. But, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's technical enough that until you have it on instinct and you practice it frequently, it just sort of fades. The way it works kind of fades out of your mind, and you feel like you've got it intuitively, and then sometimes you don't. Which is fine, that's not a bad thing, but you need to brush up on it. And this book is just a great, very quick refresher on, like, every single, like, key concept for it. Really like it. That's the Ernest, I'll chuck it in chat for anyone. If anyone's here, or if anyone's watching this on the VOD, Ernest R. Norling's Perspective Made Easy. It's a really old one, it's well established, like, it's a very popular one. But seriously, copyright's like 37. That's... Jeepers, that's coming up soon enough on the years that are going to sound like a current year rather than a past one, and that's kind of a scary thought. I remember, like, being excited about, like, welcoming in the new year of 2004. It was almost 20 years ago. Ah, well, time marches on. Ain't a thing wrong with that. The way to make it feel important is to make sure you do stuff that you remember. As long as you can remember things between 2004 and now, then it feels like it was a while ago. If you have been doing nothing of note, like, and I don't mean like world importance, I just mean of note to yourself that you care about, and you hadn't done anything that you care about since 2004, it's going to seem like 20 years vanished. It's funny how that works. You kind of need those, like, mile marker waystones in your memory. Let's see. There was another thing that I was going to grab, and I've completely forgotten what it was. Perspective book, check. Concepts for this, check. Pinterest shout out for poses that we're going to do as a warm-up, check. Oh, it's prevent a book from falling off my shelf. Okay, we're good. Okay. So. There's our notes. Practices and warm-ups. There's Miquella V1, I'll say. Which at least got a face. This is why I love folders. Like, this is still coherent and organized. I forgot I had my signature down in the corner. I forgot how tall this canvas was. What was I doing with that? It's weird. Anyway. Key things with this are horizon lines. So, let's go ahead. I'm going to crack open a new vector layer with the boyos. I'm sure that's what people say these days. Refresh. I've got a few poses on Pinterest. Main ones should keep this pose a little more exciting, but we're probably going to end up doing a hybrid of a few poses, which is risky, I acknowledge. It's gotten us in trouble before, but there's no harm in practicing and getting better, eh? Okay, let's see. Because what we want with Miquella, what will make this piece interesting, and what we forgot to do somehow, or at least didn't execute well on or forgot partway through, is we want the horizon line to be low. We want Miquella, despite not being old, despite not being giant, we want Miquella to appear to tower over us. Because that's the situation, both, you know, literally if you're, like, sitting on the altar in that particular Castle Sol, then, you know, Miquella's physically standing over you, but B, and more importantly, it's also, like, in terms of power dynamics, one of the oldest tricks in art, full stop, was if someone is more powerful, they're depicted as larger. And they're predicted as higher, or depicted, not predicted, depicted as higher up. There's a hierarchy of size and position. And that's still mostly a thing. Like, we inherently read into that sort of thing. You see a picture of a king on his throne on a dais and someone down below kneeling. The kneeling pose is part of what shows you. And sure, like the gold or the significance of a throne might show you who's in power. But honestly, if they were wearing the same clothes and the king was just sitting in a wooden chair, like a ratty old wooden chair, and the other guy was just standing below him, the king, chair dude, would still look more important, would still be the one that seems to have precedence. It's really interesting. And I mean, I'm talking like ancient Sumerian, obviously ancient Egyptian. Really, like, this goes back a long time. We've understood this. Persia, oh man, stinking... Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I get the right place in my head. Because it's easy. Oh, no, that's a museum. Hold on. I'm Googling it because I'd forgotten. Not a current one. Persepolis! Thank heavens. Yeah, there's a comic book named after it too. I knew that. Persepolis. Lots of good art and this structure on Persepolis. Yeah, no, I mean, this stuff goes way back. So, what we want on this, because the horizon line, in a literal sense, is your eye level. So let's do positioning just as sort of an underlying thing for this. Let's get ourselves a pencil. We'll stick with tilt pencil. We're going to go for a slightly smaller size, something we can work with here. You know, let's not do full size canvas right now. We're just doing some structures, practice. We can go down to like a 3, I think. Yeah. Okay. So if we want Miquella to look large and intimidating compared to us, we need a low horizon line. Because if we're below Miquella, our eye level is also going to be relatively below Miquella. So we're going to put that horizon line down here. And I know CSP has like nice horizon line tools and stuff, but like we're trying to actually practice the skill as opposed to execute a finished piece where we don't need... It's like in math class when like you need to learn some basics of math before you can use a calculator. And like, sure, eventually you use the calculator and you solve everything, but there's times when the problem solving side, you need to understand how it works in order to even put it into the dang calculator. Or in order to figure out why like the calculator might give you 2 answers and one of them's not right or junk like that. It's the same with art. Like, yeah, the technical stuff, eventually you can sort of like sublimate it or hide it away in tools where you don't need to be practicing the skill constantly. You can use these to help you. But it's still worth getting practice on the fundamentals to understand how to really use the tools well. Or like it's getting training on the tools. You need to understand what it does. Not quite as literal. I mean, it's not like they have people who drive those giant caterpillar diggers. They don't have to dig with a shovel first to appreciate it. But if someone spent 20 years digging with a shovel and they get into a caterpillar, they're probably going to fare a lot better at, I don't know, not hitting stupid stuff and controlling it than someone who just started 2 days ago. Experience pays off in weird ways. That one's not that weird a way, but it always pays off in weird ways. So, I've got some random poses on here with a lowish horizon line. Mainly because I think that guy's trying to do, like, shoujo anime poses, but I mean, they work for us, and the type of pose doesn't matter nearly so much. So we can start with... Oh, let's think how I even, like, structure bodies. It's been a while. Because we're not focusing on proportions nearly as much as perspective right now. So this is, I mean, okay, I need to make sure everything's going to the horizon line. They don't all have to go to this point. In fact, I think I want the vanishing line for this one to be a little further over. If we want really intimidating horizon line. There's our vanishing point. Now, the catch being... jeepers. How do I always forget how perspective works the second I try to talk about perspective? Ah, jeepers. Because obviously if something is over the horizon line, then it just goes on both ways. Yeah. Oh, it's because I'm being dumb. There's the actual, like, structure of the box, and then there's, like, the angle of it. These lines don't have to go all the way down. You know what? I don't know what I'm saying there. Ignore just all of that. I'm not going to try to teach perspective from memory again. I have made that mistake before. Instead of doing that mistake, that very regrettable, definitely the worst stream we've ever done mistake, let us instead focus on... I'm going to actually take a second to figure out where the horizon line is in this ref. Ah, okay. Truthfully, I think it's at the knees. By the time we're there, we're, like, looking up at the hips. So we're below the hips, but we're clearly above the ankles. The knees look about head-on. So, that's fine. That just means the torso is going to be way up there. We can get ourselves a nice gesture line to start. With this particular one, it's a fairly harsh curve. Not quite that harsh, but, you know, one of the fun things about art is you can really lean into the poses to accentuate them even more. So that's what we're going to be doing. Start with this. And we'll start with, let's get the hip position first. It looks like it's not, I mean, it's above the horizon line, but it's not like somewhere crazy far above. Hips. And then the center line is like way off in the distance. This figure is sort of turned away from us. So we're also going to be getting some foreshortening with this, which is another thing we did not do right on Miquella's initial build. So that's something to work on. This leg will be following this line fairly well. Let's see. Things always end up being like tubes. That one's technically over there, so most of that leg's obscured. I'm going to keep the legs fairly gestural and plain right now. Let's see how far that gets us. Straight down and then over. Following this. Back is a little less straight. Over. A little more taper in. There. That way we get the taper. Because that's the thing with limbs that I was always bad about, is like, how much detail do you want to give? And the answer is as little as possible, but the taper is usually not something you can skip. For example, I think we actually want to taper this one more, if I'm honest. Got like a little bit more of that going on. Get us a little more. I'm still on the positioning layer. Oh, whatever. It literally doesn't matter. Been a while since we used that pen. We'll have to bring it back out for the thumbnail. Okay. The rough leg positions, we've got the pose. Top of this probably ought to like be a little more extremely in perspective. But you can see it's eventually going to be vanishing down to that horizon line. Like it's pointed down towards that line. We go down here and we deal with the feet. Let's see. Wow, this foot's really pretty head on, isn't it? Okay. Got like a little bit of this side. Like its motion, its vanishing direction is not. My point is, it's aiming up. This one's a bad angle. It's not going to really display it well. I'm just going to do a big old rectangle at first. Where the heck is the vanishing point for this? Even the shoes look fairly head on. Like we're above it still. This particular piece. Try to get some consistency in where those are pointing. The actual vertical isn't really messed with here. This whole one is actually like at kind of an angle, which is going to be messy. Angles and vanishing points always end up a little messy. They don't have to. I'm sure for many people they don't, but for me they always seem to. Like sometimes, and this was actually the other tip for the head, is sometimes you have to draw a box around the angled box. Just like draw a box in normal perspective and then put the angled thing inside it, and it's easier. see. Really, this thing should be in a box that's that's still too sideways. This one really is just like coming towards us. It means its vanishing point is really gonna be on this plane. Okay, okay. There we go. We've got like that little bit of the heel. Got the shoe. The realization that even with that, the shoe is still like kind of at an angle. Like not from the vanishing point, but just it's tilted. There we go. Okay, we got the lower half. Hey, yay, yay. Perspective, it's fun, but it does occasionally get complicated. Let's try to do a little actual structure here. Or a little more actual structure. Because we didn't structure the torso last time very well. Definitely tilted more up, it's in line with this. And we've got foreshortening playing a lovely little messy role on it. Plus just a funky shape on this outfit. The head still really does end up in the middle, even though the actual like dividing line is more over here. Got the arm spot there in the vest. Got a fairly stiff arm, that's fine. It counters the pose nicely. I'm sure that's no accident. The other arm is just like, I don't know, it's not even really in view. Got like a hand down here. For the record, their arm is a little longer than I'm depicting it. Elbow really ought to get it to here. But I liked the sharpness of that bend, so we're going to lean into that. Keep a sharp angle, but get it lower. And angle back. Keep with the limb tapering. We've got a hand. Okay. Now for the head. At this point, let's see, hold on. I need to think about where the head's physically positioned. Center of head is really over this collar piece. Got it. Not like crazy high over it either. There's the bottom of our box in actuality. We'll have a little bit of vanishing going on. We can lean into the amount of vanishing a lot more if we want to make this really dramatic. Right now I'm just trying to mimic what we've actually got in this image, but the next one I may like try to exaggerate it to make it look more grand. I think that would be good. With this box, we can see under it. We can see underneath the chin. So if we're thinking about it in a box, and we can see this side of the face. So thinking about that as a box. I mean, the hair is an extension of it. Normally, I think the hair would just be included in that box, but it's still, you know, whatever. Good enough. We've got hair. So there. Like this is already a more dynamic pose. And I mean, the other pose was from a ref too. It's not like these were all from refs. But I think this one is more dynamic, in part because the perspective actually makes it look like distant parts are distant. It's not just like all flat in your face. It's like, oh, that's like up a ways. Not like right on me. Okay, pose / perspective, refresh, A. Cool, whatever. I'm gonna do another one, except this time I'm going to exaggerate the perspective. That'll be fun with this one. Okay, hold on, let me... Not really... Oh, it's because I used Control Scroll to zoom in too far? That's on me. Cool. Okay, here we go. And again, if you want to actually see these refs, they are on the Pinterest. You get there on sifstreams.com or sifamir.com. You'll get to the main site, and that'll point you to the Pinterest. Okay, let's see. Once again, we want a really, really low horizon line on this one. If we're trying to exaggerate it, let's really lean into it, which in this case means make it even lower than it would be and make the taper even higher. On this one, I mean, the line of action, this is actually a very static pose. Line of action is going to be something fairly basic. I may like lean into it a little bit more, but not much, because the line of action is not the piece that I'm trying to dramatize here as much. What I'm going to play with is perspective. Because right now, in the original, like, I don't know, they've got a wide stance, but it's still basically, if we're trying to draw the rough, like, box that the character would fit in, sort of like the old Dune, like, phaser shields from the, like, 80s one, which apparently someone recreated over the modern movie, which is hysterical. We've got, like, a lean to it, you know. Oh, okay, hold on. Right, extreme vertical vanishing point, a long way away. That's fine. I always forget, when you're dealing with 3 points of vanishing points, one of them isn't on the horizon line, and that's the one that I'm really exaggerating here. The other two, however, are going to be on this horizon line, so I want to make sure that everything's pointing towards the same way. This one will be pointing more like this. I mean, it's going to hit this horizon line a long way off, but it will get there. It's still roughly moving down, while this is roughly level. Great. This one's moving down a little faster. Cool. Actually, this could probably be a little more. But the point is that the person in perspective here... okay. There we go. I'm gonna... even with the... it's amazing how easy it is to underestimate this sort of thing when you're just trying to sketch it out. So it's you know, something more like this. Tall, they're leaning into it. This needs to be more exaggerated and match that one so they land in the same place. And like that. It's dramatic. It looks tall and ominous, sure. But it's not really what we're going for here. So, we'll take that. We'll use the same horizon line. I could use a line tool for, but where is the fun in that? And let's just really exaggerate it. Rather than having that vanishing point be way off in the distance, what if we just put it, like, here? And I am gonna use the straight line tool just to work this one out. Wow. Okay, there is actually roughly where it is, apparently, with the old one. We can do better. Let's put it here. Because having this closer means that the amount of vanishing is going to be more extreme. See how much more tilted that is? And if we draw a block with the same top, it looks much more dramatic and much more far away because it's vanishing, quote-unquote, at a faster rate. That's not the right way to describe it, most likely. But let's put our vanishing point there. And, yeah, okay. We've got... I'm going to go ahead and hide this other box. I'm going to make a third layer because I'm dumb. Somehow this one became the pose alignment layer, which is silly. When I'm doing these exercises, I never use the layers for what I claim I'm going to use them for. It's crazy how much I get off track. Okay, pose / perspective refresh B. Why do I name things so long? I did this in coding too. I have very long variable names because I wanted to know what the heck they were. Like, don't get me wrong, having a single character as your variable name can work in certain situations. Like if it's an index or something, use I. Yeah, whatever. That's a standard. But like if you got a random variable, don't just name it like L. I don't know if L is the color or the weight or the height or whatever. The rate at which it explodes. L tells me nothing. So I would be overly, like, I would have like 4-word variable names in camel case. I'm like, explosion rate incrementer. Or things like that, you know. So, although if it's an incrementer, I probably still use I, because I don't think incrementer is even a word. It'd be like an anyway. I'm getting sidetracked, and it's been a long time since I programmed. If you think I get out of... like, if you think I get rusty when I'm, like, go a week without drawing, holy cow. It has been... 3 years since I last picked up Java. Well, it was... technically, it was P5, and then P5.js, which were libraries on top of Java and JavaScript respectively. You know, coding is fun. Not what we're doing today, though. We've got ourselves our dramatic box. Now let's put ourselves a person in it. Knowing full well that our action line is going to resist this a little bit, arc forward even a little more, which will lean into that, which should be fun. I kind of want an even more dramatic one, but we'll start with this. I mean, we can lean into it as much as we want on subsequent iterations. Okay, we're still below. Let's start with, I guess, hip line as a final place. It's hard to figure out where to start with people. And I know this box is actually far too wide for this particular person. Like, it's just getting the perspective. It's not literally a box that exactly matches them. Okay, so hold on. That actually... in lining up with this, which it doesn't have to, but it does in this case. Lining up with that. There we go. Slightly, I mean, it's going to be on that center line, so that makes sense. Hip joint. You can see I like construct this differently every single time. I should probably stop doing that. I ought to standardize this at some point, but, you know, it works right now. Okay, legs tend to be cylindrical. We can represent them with rectangles, but that's not always helpful. Knees in this one are... oh, it's always hard to tell. They feel like they're roughly at the camera height again. They might be a tiny bit above or below it. The taper of the knee is so smooth, it's hard to tell if you're like... it's like with a box, you know immediately. If you're above it, you see the top. Harsh edge. Gets really, really faint sometimes if you're only a little bit above it, and then you're dead on, and then it's like, oh, obviously below it, we can see the bottom. But like, if the thing's a dang trapezoid already, then like suddenly you could be above it, and you still like might see a tiny bit of the bottom. You see a lot more of the top, and you're like, ah, okay, maybe I'm above it. If you're head on, you see both equally. Assuming it's a, you know, equal trapezoid. If you're below it, you're getting, like, really exaggerated things like this. And it's like, ah, man. And the knee is a lot more trapezoidy in shape. I mean, honestly, it's more like a platform that, like, tapers off in all directions. Or like a gemstone. Like what people think of as emeralds. Like, side view. Guess side view would be more like this, really. You know, something like that. Makes it a little more complicated. Also, I mean, you could even see in that like drawing something with a little bit of perspective and a little bit of angle makes it look so much more exciting, and it makes it easier to parse what's happening. It can make stoic poses exciting. Whereas drawing everything just flat and head-on can make the most dynamic pose look like a sticker. Not that stickers are bad, but they are very static. I'm thinking the knees are slightly below or on frame. I feel like I see a tiny bit more at the top than the bottom, but I think lighting might also be messing with that. So we'll go with this. Typical leg bendiness. We'll lean into that a little more too. See, we can see the full, like, there's areas, like, it's not like the legs are right next to each other. They're spread a little bit. It's a wide stance. They're holding a big weapon, a sword in this case. I realize that probably sounds terrible, but don't read into that. This is literally like a stinking cardboard broadsword. That kind. Nothing gross. Anyway, back to the matter at hand, which is not accidental euphemisms. I hate accidental euphemisms. I like puns. I like a good, clever pun. Most of the euphemism ones aren't clever. They're just, like, almost anything can stand in for it. Not to be pretentious about stinking puns, but, like, it does feel like there are some, like, even the stupidest puns have a little bit of wordplay. But euphemisms, it's like, it's not that it's low-hanging fruit necessarily, it's just too easy. Like, you can just literally pick any given object, and if you say it with the right tone of voice, it'll imply something. Like, that's not pun effort, that's just, we have a default assumption of what vague words mean. I'm actually a big defender of puns. I love a good pun. I'm not sure I could say I'm a defender. I'm not very active in the presumably existent pun defender community. I have no idea if that's real, but the internet's big enough, it probably is. Okay. Exaggerated. It still needs to be moving towards that same vanishing point at the top. So I need to try to think through my lines a little bit. Mainly that one isn't right where it should be. Let me pay a little attention to the silhouette on this side. Okay, so rib cage more like here. Shouldn't really be doing a rounded rib cage for it at this point, given that we've got boxy everything else, but it seems to fit, so let's run with that. We'll say they've even got their shoulders a little more dramatic than this pose would necessarily require. Lean into something more like this. And we've got ourselves interesting arm poses. I've heard people describe arms as like working like chain links, the way the muscles intertwine. Like you end up with sort of chunks that stick out in the width and then in the length. Not to say that there's giant holes in the middle of your arm. I mean, if there are, you should probably get that looked at. That's not good. But it's sort of one way to think about it. Because you've got like, I don't know, you end up with like flat muscles like this, and then other ones that counter. You ought to actually just look at an arm sometime. That's my advice. Keep an eye on it, and you might see what I mean. Like at the elbow, it's flat one direction, whereas at the wrist, it's pretty much always flat perpendicular to the elbow's flatness. You can like try to bend them, but they're counter each other. And the bicep that goes into the elbow is a big bump that's like, once again, perpendicular to the flatness of the elbow itself. I'm talking the inside of the elbow for the record. True of the outside too, but it's easier to see on the inside. You end up with these really funky floor bead looking things. This was a bad idea. This doesn't illustrate my point at all. Look at an actual arm. And if you want references, we have them on Pinterest, not to shill that even more. It's not like I'm making money off of the Pinterest or anything. Just a place for reference images. I just think it's handy. This hand comes down to about here, clenched in a fist. Once again, normally the arm would taper to be much smaller, but the perspective is also kind of countering that a little bit. The fist actually ends up really big, which is fine. This other arm, kind of even leaned back. But it's pretty distant, so it's going to appear much smaller than the arm close to us. Probably ought to appear a little shorter even. Alright, I'm on an actual vector layer this time. I've forgotten to set up vector layers so often lately that I just didn't even realize I was on one. There we go. We've got the sword. It's kind of going at a different angle, but that's okay. Still going to play into our perspective game a little bit. Let's see, we can really lean into the head tilt a little too. In the original, the head's tilted slightly up, but we're still under it, so you can still see the underside, not like the top of the head. I think we're going to tilt it slightly down even. Oh, yeah, see the bottom of that, not in actual good perspective. Need to be using these perspective lines that I set up for myself to think through where these should be going. Not that it has to have the same vanishing points, but it still needs to be going towards the correct horizon and all that. And while the head cube doesn't have to have the same vanishing points as the rest of the body, it should have the same vanishing points as the other parts of the head cube, or else it's going to end up looking really warpy. Now, obviously, oddball shapes may not always follow that rule, but because we're making the cube to put an oddball shape inside of it, the cube does need to follow that rule, because it's our alignment for later. There. Coming down, you can sort of see that comes through. Center line. Let's see. The angle of the sword is interesting. Yep, like this. I love that they made this giant cardboard sword prop just for this. It's funny to me. Okay. That ought to be the center of it. We'll make it a little less of a dramatic sword. But if you look at this compared to the original pose, it's actually, I would say, more intimidating. Which, I mean, the original pose isn't supposed to be intimidating the same way. It's fun, though. But jeepers, that line was... Hold on, okay, let me fix the sword, and then we'll be good. But because we were able to lean into the perspective a lot more, it let us really make this more dramatic. And we could even, like, do it more. Like, if we really wanted to lean into this, we could make the leg, like, taper pretty aggressively, too. Have larger, more intimidating feet. And then it would look... Because the amount that the size changes from here up to the head up there really would look intimidating. We could even make the head like a little smaller to emphasize, but heads are always bigger than I expect them to be. So I try not to make them too small. Still needs to be proportional to the rest of the body. Let's see. We don't even want them looking directly down at us. I think we just want, like... Still want to see a little of the underside. Adds to the intimidation factor. Feels like there's like more head that should still be behind that. Yeah, like let's get the actual skull in there. Cool. There we go. So that lets us really make more dynamic stuff. My point, using perspective correctly. And now that we've warmed up on it a little bit, I want to have a go, well, I want to test one pose real quick, and then I want to have a go at actually doing Miquella. And the pose that I want to test is not a, let's see. It is not... Ooh, it's not like a full body, like angle perspective one. I want to test grips for the blade, things that will make it interesting. So we'll do some very quick sketches on those. But we're going to do that after the break, so I'll see y'all in just a couple of minutes. Go get some water, get something to eat, snack, and take care of yourselves. I'm still muted, aren't I? I've been talking to myself this whole time. Dag nabbit. Howdys and salutations again, y'all. Oh, man. I stood up and I thought to myself, I'm going to forget to unmute this. And then I came back 2 minutes later and forgot to unmute it. Ah, rats. Okay, what I was saying, before we get into the rest of Miquella, is we wanted to think through where the focal point of this pose is. And in my mind, that is partly the extreme perspective, but partly the focal point is the point of action, which is Miquella's about to swing the Eclipse Shotel at you. And I had a whole monologue about forgetting the Eclipse Shotel and almost calling it like the Dark Moon Sun Sword, which isn't a thing. But I guess that's just... oh well. We have to move on, I suppose, because I genuinely forgot the name of it for a while. So yes, the focal point is the Eclipse Shotel and Miquella swinging it. Miquella's character design in general also has a lot more focal point on hair. Their hair is kind of a key attribute. It's one of their more defining features. Be that as a way to track their age, or just because it looks cool. Whatever the reason is, it's a critical piece. It's like the reason people were able to identify Miquella from very scant evidence, even in like the single image teaser for the DLC. Which apparently there's like a 30-minute Vati video. Great lore YouTuber. Almost said VTuber. Just waiting for WTubers. We're just progressing through the alphabet. Guess they never had T-tubers. Sounds like a type of potato now that I've said it enough. Anyway, but yeah, Vati Video apparently did like a 30-minute deep dive into the lore in that single image and still missed stuff. So, like, stinging, densely packed as always from Soft. Very cool. But yeah, Miquella, hair is a defining point. Obviously, the original reason to do this piece was to do a nice, well-drawn piece with a face, to force me to actually practice faces, which I've got to say has worked. At least as far as forcing me to practice. We'll see if we achieve well-drawn. Still a long time for that. But the main point is the hair, the face, and the shotel, and all of that is up at the top. So, when we're figuring out our pose, what we did last time that was stupid and bad, understandable mistake, but still dumb and bad, was I figured out a good pose that was good for the composition and looked dramatic. It had the cool side view, and then I was like, okay, we'll figure out the arms. That's not how things work. Because when you move your arms, however you move them, it affects your shoulder rotation, your shoulder height, like up and down, like rotation too. It even affects like twist on the waist. It affects twist, like it can affect all the way, like anywhere in your legs if you're standing up. Like how you move, especially if you're wielding a weapon, you've got to balance and put your weight into that wisely. It's not to say that they're insanely heavy and unusable, but if you want to control it well, you need to be poised to use it effectively. And not Dark Souls 3 poised. Heavens knows nobody was that poised. So, what that means is if the shotel and the attack motion are focal points, let's figure out where the heck the arms go first, and then we'll figure out the body pose to support it later. So we've got a few refs on Pinterest for that we'll be doing quick sketches of. And for the record, that was the other thing you may have seen when I was making no noise, because I muted myself like a madman. The reason I was showing Miquella again was to say that we caught that motion and the importance of the arms moving the shoulders with the fabric. We did that part well, but we still didn't do it with the original pose. This may not be a static pose staring directly at a camera, but it's definitely a static pose staring slightly to the left of the camera, which is not any less static. It may look slightly cooler, but it still looks bad if the arms are moving and the shoulders aren't moving with them. So, yeah, that's why we need to plan this out earlier, which is a good lesson. A good lesson in composition and posing, I guess composition to an extent. Posing in perspective and proportions, the P's. And just, I don't know. Again, this is why doing those quick little character designs where we did the 4-hour timed ones, I know 4 hours isn't quick, and it takes me like a week real time, but even so, this is why that's so important, is because I'm able to iterate through all of these stages faster and identify problems that don't show up until later, faster. And so then I learned to look for them when we're going back and doing slower, more methodical, well thought out projects like hopefully this one turns out to be. At least that's what I'm hoping happens. You know, it could all be bluff. Again, I'm not an expert either. And I think we all learn different ways to learn, and it's really easy, real tempting to go and just like try to collect new ways to learn. It's like, oh, this will be the one that instantly makes it click. And that's not really how things work. What was it? Atomic Habits put it best. They were talking about it for habits, but really anything is the reason we frequently chase like new methods rather than committing to old ones is because a new method has basically infinite potential. Until you've done it, you don't know if it's going to click magically and make things work, or if it's going to be meh, or if it's going to be, you know, practical, which is probably what it is. People are constantly chasing like the quick little tidbits on Pinterest, easy tutorials, quick things, new techniques, so on and so forth. It's really easy to chase those because until you do it, it could magically solve everything. As opposed to whatever you're doing now, which you've experienced and you know doesn't magically solve everything. It works with practice. And that's not to say the quick tips on Pinterest or anywhere else are bad. But they're not a substitute for practice most of the time. Sometimes it'll be a shortcut that makes a big difference, but usually not. But again, even with this face drawings, I'd gotten stuck in some bad ruts with my old methods. So the new method, I don't think it's even that the new like orb and mask method is inherently better than the old one I'd been using. I think it's just different enough that it forced me to not fall back on bad muscle memory and instead to actually attempt to, you know, learn and like focus on the proportions themselves. Scary. Okay, let's put that away. And let's look at some actual poses here. We're going to stick to very quick, simple poses. I'm going to try to keep proportions roughly right, but I'm also going to try to keep these a little more gestural. Got kind of two arms that overlap, and a face. Okay, the face is really more like, yeah, there we go. Tilting this way. And these two arms are holding with hands that hold on to the hilt of a small sword in this particular example. And so that gives us very interesting, with this one they've even got like, they're leaning into it like this, which is interesting. I've got like a soft curve. Center line is like over here for their chest, which is interesting in my mind. Almost looks like a Ricardo pose. Anyway, and actually with the original, it's tilted even more extremely. The sword obscures part of their face, which is really dramatic and helps. It also helps with depth a little bit because it overlaps in a way that makes it clear where things are, which is something that, and that doesn't necessarily mean like, it's not like it would be unclear if it didn't overlap, but it having depth also adds a little bit of like your brain's like, oh, it helps with realism. It helps you parse the image better, because if everything's just flat, then you're like, oh, everything's on the same layer. You're like, your automatic internal first glance thing isn't going to be able to prioritize as well, because it's just like, oh, everything's on the same layer, equal priority. If you've got stuff in front and behind, you can immediately start parsing separate things a little more easily. So that's one option. This sort of Ricardo-y pose is cracking me up. Something like that. There we go. For part. Another pose that we could consider, one if we want to be leaning more into it. I think this one's like a stock image or something. Oh yeah, apparently Shutterstock is on Pinterest. Well, ain't that neat. This one's similar. It doesn't have the overlap, but for the Eclipse Shotel in particular, I think it might allow some interesting things because that Shotel itself has a very interesting curve. That is something we might want to lean into. So they literally just have one arm completely obscured behind the other. Except for just like a little shard there. You've got hand. You've got hand. Thumbs. You've got the sword. Now the sword itself has a little bit more depth because it's not just straight onto the camera. There's a little bit of angle to it, which is kind of neat. It also looks like it's fake, but I mean, it's stock image. I don't know what you expected. A real sword wouldn't be necessary for the stock image, and actually kind of the cheesy hokiness of a fake one leans into certain things that matches with other stock images and could be thematic. I'm 100% on board with hokey. And then I need to get this curve right, because part of it goes behind the sword, part of it doesn't. And it actually is having an impact on the perspective and how we view it. Anyway, and they've got a face that's just sort of like this. We can see a little bit of the back. Tiny bit of the underside, not so much. Okay. So this one, if we had the show tell, we could really lean into the curve. We could have the curve sort of behind the face and like overlap it. Let's see. Yeah, because you could have a pretty dramatic curve there. That could even imply an almost like demon horn kind of look to it, which would be, I don't know, maybe a stretch, but fun symbolism. Or we could have it like this, like really arcing over Miquella, which helps sort of bring emphasis to that part of it, and still is dramatic in view, like it, you know, arcing around him symbolically. I don't mean symbolically in the bland sense of like, oh, I don't know, he's associated with rune arcs or something, but like in the sense that his hair is going to be a curve, or their hair. Miquella depends on the day. I think in Castle Saw, it's actually not clear. But they talk about Miquella, and I think most people don't know the Saint Trina Miquella duo. So I assume Miquella form? Who knows? Anyway, their hair is going to have a similar curve, so this will frame it in an interesting way. We also have the option to make it where this is actually pointed more directly at the camera, where the spike is at us, which will sort of engage the viewer a little more, and might be a more natural angle to hold this. I don't actually know. But drawing the actual Shotel in perspective is gonna stink. Worth doing though, if we want to do it right. Does mean that a lot of the spines will be obscured. I mean, see, even that looks like it's arcing down. Or something like this. Arc on the inside of those, I suppose. Anyway. So a couple options there. That's actually an interesting one for the Shotel. And we could get the pose for that pretty well. Another one that's more, like, prepared. This one almost feels more defensive. It's funny because they have a stinking, very large cosplay sword. But I think it's because they have the sword literally blocking their face. Like, they've put their weapon between themselves and the viewer, which is interesting. Not that part. Not their eyes. They can still see you. Got the pommel. They've got a very, very cool, fancy hilt. Hilt and then guard going on here. It's one of this sort that has like the metal rings that are like looping around. Slightly later era, not really medieval by the time you're getting to those, but they're fun. Okay, we'll get to our point. Got the arm going there, and then even with this, we can see like a little bit under the head and a little bit on this side. I like this box method for faces. This is actually really helpful for figuring out the perspective. And I know that it actually ought to tilt a tiny bit more, but that's okay. Torso is kind of 3/4-y. I don't think in a traditional 3/4 sense, but, you know. Point is, I like this one as a defensive pose. I don't think it actually works well for Miquella, though, because Miquella is very much the aggressor in the image that we are doing. So I've got one more. And this one is a pose I would describe more as desperate, and that makes someone dangerous. And it also would not be wrong for Miquella, who's apparently willing to go to great depths to bring back a certain somebody. And that somebody lore is my greatest fear theory that I don't want to be true, is for Miquella to be Fia. And Fia is like Saint Trina gone rogue. I would not like it if that was real. Because Miquella seems cool, or he's got me on the bewitching branch, one of the stinking two. Perhaps I am that gullible. But Fia stinks. I hate Fia. Look, her whole those who live in destined death thing, it's not like a great solution. Like, I understand a little where she's coming from. But it's more the numerous people she intentionally murders and then, like, what's the word? Desecrates in order to support that cause? That's, like, I'm not cool with that. If she'd left Rajier the heck alone, maybe we be having a different conversation, but she did not. She very much did not, and I did not appreciate that. This is one where I'm actually going to start with the head. And it's an interesting one. The head angle, I think, really plays into the desperation look on this one. I should mention, not like hiding in a corner weeping desperation. I mean, like, desperation and absolutely able to kill you at a moment's notice if you make the wrong move. Like, backed into a corner and not afraid to fight their way out of it kind of desperation. Which may not literally describe Miquella, but like in the grand scheme of what that crazy Castle Saul plan seems to have been, kinda does. And okay, hold on, we can write the foreshortening on this. In this example, it's, I don't know, very simple hilt, but at least it looks like it's metal. Well, in the actual pose, the angle of this thing is more, well, I guess it kind of still works. It goes behind the head, is the point. The point goes behind the head. This looks too hunchbacked. It's really more of... Oh, rats, I destroyed the other sword, didn't I? It was too close anyway. Oh, it's because the shoulder line was creeping up on the neck. Okay, that's why. I'm trying to figure out what was looking so hunchbacked about that. Belt. Kick back, that's fine. There we go. It's like form-fitting chainmail. You know. Ear. Hair. So on and so forth. Minecraft character. Okay, not that we need Minecraft characters on here. Were y'all the 1 pixel, 2 pixel, or 4 pixel eyes? I was 4 back in the day when I made my own Minecraft skins. Fun times. Anyway, the thing about this pose in actuality that makes it interesting is the expression on the face. Because they're looking up directly at us. A lot of their face is in shadow, including their eyes. So even though their head is below us, like, and they seem, it sort of plays into this desperation where they're technically placed below the viewer, so they seem like they're in a weaker position, but they have the sword and they're looking up in defiance, which sort of shows weak position plus bravery is potentially a desperation. You know, I'm not saying it actually is literal desperation. She's a stock image. I'm sure she's fine. But it feels like what they were going for. And that leaning, like, I haven't got the angle on this one quite right. The leaning into it. Really, like, head tilted down slightly so you get that, like, shadow over the eyes. The anime will look in one, except real. Anyway. The point is, that one's interesting. There's two that I think are really interesting for Miquella, now that we've sketched these out. I'll be torn. As much as I like the sort of like rhythm that we get with the hair and stuff, I'm not sure that that would actually work in the final image. The exercise bicycle? What? Oh yes, one can always sense fear. That seemed like less of a fearful desperation and more of an I'm gonna stab you kind of desperation, truth be told. But, I suppose there's overlap in those two. No, I have no idea what you mean. Or are you talking about... Oh, are you talking about the one where she, like, starts leaning the exercise bike back and forth in that, like, old Markiplier React video? If so, that's a throwback. No? Okay, not that one. Then I really don't know. Oh, I've got no clue. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Deadpool's funny, but I don't follow him on Twitter or anything. I don't really keep up with what he does. Please do, yeah, I'll have to check that one out. Okay, hold on. In the meantime, though, before I get too off track, I ought to actually try to do a proper Miquella pose before the end of the stream today. That said, let me also open Discord. I've had Discord closed, keepers, because, well, it's been messing with my audio lately. It, like, steals the audio control from other things, and I don't know why. It just started, like, a week ago, so maybe it'll sort itself out. I'm gonna give it a little more time before I really try to debug it. But yeah. Yeah. Hold on, let me check one more thing. Yes, then in the meantime, guess this is what we're doing. Nope, not that. So what we talked about on stream, to recap the excitement of what we've been doing, which is mostly, I don't know, technical practice. We're focusing on a low horizon line to get a dramatic view. A high vanishing point for Miquella's, like, pardon, for the, so that way we have a very intense, distant vanishing. Actually, not an overly high vanishing point. We want one that's kind of close, so it's more dramatic and extreme in the pose. And then we want to make sure that we've got a pose that really works for this Eclipse Shotel weapon that we're doing. We're still doing Elden Ring fan art. I'd paused for like 2 months and I came back to a piece and found a bunch of stuff that I didn't like about it. So we're reworking it. Not giving up on it though. We're just gonna keep on reworking it. V1 here, technically fine. Obviously, we'd still, like, the faces are rough. But, like, the perspective and the foreshortening in the arms isn't great. The actual perspective on the shoulders and such doesn't really make sense with the rest of the body. And the shoulders don't rotate with this arm, so the pose ended up super static, even if the fabric didn't. So, we're going to keep on tweaking. And have another go at a more... Let's see, where... Okay, I guess I hit all of them. It's something that will be a little more dynamic and a little more exciting. So let's see, if that ended up with that, then we do want a fairly tall and narrow vanishing point, I think. No, wide is fine. Okay. I'm just trying to think all this through in my head. There's a lot of things to try to keep straight now. So, of those poses, I think the best weapon angles... This one was too much like they were defending from us. This one could work. Holding it sort of very much at the ready, kind of somber, kind of nervous, but very much poised to go. I'm trying to imagine it with the Shotel, though. I think it'd be more exciting. Like, yeah, that might capture the mood okay, but I think it would be more exciting if we actually got something in action, or the moment before the action. Which is why I'd lean towards one of these top two, especially this one on the top left, because we can really lean into it. And put the Shotel, and actually we might still be able to get that sort of rhythm with the hair. Put the Shotel in an interesting spot, with good view. We could even have it like tilt slightly towards the viewer still if we want. Let's see. The torso tilt's like a little more to the side than I would have expected, but that still works with what we're trying to do as long as the face is at a decent angle. But I think... not that face. Where was the other one? Okay, we'll have to keep tweaking on the faces, but we can at least get a better face perspective. Because in the old Miquella, like, best as we can tell, we're posed above Miquella, which isn't what we want. Like, we definitely don't want to look like we're above the character who's supposed to be intimidatingly posed above us. So, yeah, shouldn't be seeing the top of the head. Yeah, just little things like that. I think we can do better. Let me just... okay. Sorry, I'm balancing, like, too many different things at once. And you can tell it's the end of the day and my energy's fading. Like, my multitasking is getting worse. Let's see, I've got half an hour. Let's see if we can do it. The other thing to remember for this pose... You know what? Hold on. We have resize tools. Let's figure out the pose at a reasonable scale and then scale it up. I think that will work better. That way we can have a vanishing point that's actually somewhat distant and somewhat an angle that would be exciting. And it won't be like some impossible thing. I still like the idea of a slight 3/4 view. Let's even like very, very lightly with this. Get our straight line tool. I can see it, I ought to use it sometimes. Let's see, we could probably even make this more exciting if we had this like so tight. So that the whole thing, yeah. Okay, yeah, that'll be more dramatic. Let's start with that. Okay. Now, as we remember, we're starting with the head and arms pose, because that's the most important part of this, like, scene, so that's what we really want to lean into. So, thinking about where the shoulders are going to be, and things like that will be sort of part of it. Trying to think through the best way to depict this. How do we capture the arms? Because with the challenge with this pose, it is still basically, like, the reference is still basically an overhead pose. So we wouldn't want that, but we still want the face to be visible. That does add a challenge. Could have, like, one arm raised with it. Tilted forward, body tilted back. That'd be kind of like a counter arm. Feels like we'd lose some of the dynamism from that, though, eventually. Yeah, like, I don't know. Other options for... Oh, but step one, let's just try seeing what this looks like from below. I'm going to do a quick sketch on that. Would obscure part of the face. Would undercut some things, but I mean, at this point we've gotten a lot of face practice out of this project, so I'm not too worried about that. That's the other thing. This shoulder is slanted. Keepers. One of these shoulders is slanted down lower than the other, and I forgot to account for that. Go with that real quick. At this point, it wouldn't even need to be lower than that side if we want to have a shot at seeing the other side. Nope, 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 nope. Just trying to think through the logic on this. Let's see. In general. Oh, unpacking. Very methodical. Well, that is my jam. Not gonna lie. We may have to try that game out. I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. So we'll see. Again, we want this to be more dramatic angle. Perspective line. There we go. That works better. Clear out some of that other rubble. Well, it would make Miquella's expression hard to read, but that's fine by me, actually. It'd be kind of intimidating. Honestly, short but fun kind of is better for the streaming, because I'm trying to spend most of my time drawing. And also, I mean, after stinking Elden Ring, I'm down for short games. I don't have another 200 hours to commit. That's why I haven't picked up Tears of the Kingdom, the new Zelda game, yet. Really tempting. Really tempting. But, man, this doesn't seem like it'd be a good idea. Oh, rats, I put this on the wrong there. That's fine. Sort of got the idea. Oh, nice. Yes. Chapters and sections is always good. I want to go back to Passepartout as well. Its chapters are interesting. It seems like it's going somewhere with all the stuff that's happening. What? Gets it behind the hair. That kind of works. The only challenge is that it obscures the face so much. And I guess we could go like a really extreme underview. Hold on, let me erase her back up to a size that can actually clean this up. Okay, going for a more intense underview. We could even have like face visible between the arms. course, the Chotel would end up at a weird angle if we actually wanted it to be visible. In fact, everything would be at kind of a weird angle at this point. Dagnabbit. Why does this always happen? Composition fights me when I find a good pose. Poses fight me when I find a good composition. Okay, hold on. Let's redo all that. And let's just move it out of the way. I don't want to throw ideas away if I still put them on the wrong layer. Put that one over there. Okay. Poised to Strike is an interesting one, but maybe, if we go back and look at some of those other ones, is there another one that works better from the below angle? Something that would fit well from a more intimidating angle. Perhaps we do go back to this one, a slightly less dynamic stab, but it would give us room, well, face might, well, the arm being off to the side would help. We still risk obscuring the face. This one already did obscure the face. This one potentially wouldn't. Be an interesting one to consider. Let's think about with that one real quick. That's talking shoulders. And we're talking one arm that would potentially obscure some things. That's okay. Other arm held more back. Sort of see. Oh, jeepers, those lines are already getting muddled. We got at least a little bit more of that visible to the viewerness. Go on. I wonder if it'd be more intimidating if Miquella wasn't even looking at us. I'm trying to figure out if, like, lack of paying attention would even imply, like, a sort of apathy towards the whole situation would imply something even more intimidating. So many options. So many options. We could get, you know, leg pose that works. Would be a power stance. I feel like Miquella probably wouldn't power stance as fun as that would be. Oh, let me think. Maybe... I mean, legs aren't even going to be visible in this when we're done, so I don't know why I'm bothering so much with those. Could be, like, up on a step, though. I mean... Jeepers, that's not the right pen. Still not the right pen. There we go. It would make more sense, honestly, if the bent leg was the one going forward rather than the one on the side. This one's... That one's straight. This one's bent up on a step. Way less dynamic, though. Dramatic. Looks kind of like they're just walking at us. Won't really be visible in the final thing. I suspect the final piece is going to be something centered more like, whoops, more like this. And I think having Miquella look down at you from that would probably be better. In a pose where they look like they're about to snap, them paying attention to you is actually bad. In a pose where they're being cold and methodical, them paying attention to you would probably be better. Potentially. I don't think this captures the exact feel that we're going for. Still, it does tell me a few things. One, I got the twist of the torso wrong again. While we pay attention to these things, if we really, truly want to do this, let's test it with the body actually angled the correct way, yeah? Yeah, let's do it. Oh, jeepers. Okay, hold on. There we go, that's better. If you're really leaning into a swing like this, we've just erased all of our perspective guidelines, but that's fine. They were more of guidance anyway, right? Hopefully? Okay. But if head is facing us, shoulders are not. One arm that will still be above us. Trying to detect that effectively. I can do that more easily with the lower part of it. Okay. Sort of vanishing that way. This positioning on that's a little bit off, but as long as I can get the actual pose right, it would be better. The other arm further back, and oops, hand, wrist, hand, two. I'd have the Shotel properly frame this pose. We could have the Shotel counter it, which would be kind of interesting. Trapping themselves, perhaps. We could even have it more vertical, aligned with the pose, and not countering it so much. I kind of like. We'd need to see with the hair how that ends up working. Still above us, very much at this phase. Bogus. My brain is ruined by Among Us, and I'm not even that mad, I'm gonna be honest. I want more on the side than the front, even. More on the side. Front with this. That's interesting. I kinda like that, though. That makes it a lot more lively. Leg position's more exciting too. Even if it's like this, it's going to be somewhat obscured. So we could even have like a fairly bold leg position for the back one. The front one be slightly more like this, although I feel like I want the confidence. No trepidation going into this. It's full on. We're doing it. That's perhaps slightly too leaned into it. Okay. Does it look good? No. Does it look like an actual pose that we might be able to work with? Potentially. Now we just need to properly put it in perspective. I'm just going to call this pose refinement. Okay. Trying to think through. This still feels a little stiff, and I don't want it to be just the same pose we did before, but angled a little differently, you know? Which this runs the risk of doing if we're not careful. Part of that is because this really ought to be more that meeting the other hand, and having the curve could make that exciting. Part of it's also the perspective. We haven't really leaned into the perspective with this particular one yet. We can do that in a minute. Part of that, it's also not the moment of action. And having the show tell raised is just so much better. I'm thinking let's do one more pose refinement. Yeah, we spend so much time on this. Should just look up a pose and then pick it and be done. But I have like an actual like message and meaning. Well, meaning feels like a little pretentious, but I've got an idea of what I want this scene to actually be, you know? Okay, low horizon line. It'll be low once we're more like this. We'll deal with table position and such later. Okay. Extreme angle. The side view might solve our problem. We could do that. That looks more formidable. That looks more daunting. Let's start with this. If we're assuming a side view that twists more at the shoulders, then that might let us do one of those more dynamic poses without it obscuring the face. I'm not sure it will. I just want to consider the option. We had that one, but from below. There's always going to be one arm in front of the face for that pose. Okay. That one's less tight, but... oh, that could work. There's one pose that we hadn't tried yet. And we really might just be able to use the pose. I just realized we zoomed in. I was wondering why that felt so big all of a sudden. I'm just going directly off of a ref, which I've got on the Pinterest if anyone cares to see the refs. Only said that like 6 times this stream. Sort of like, I don't know, leg, big. I guess be effective for that to really work. I'm not sold on this one. I mean, it does get one of the hands out of the way. I'm trying to think if there's a more... oops. There we go. Is there a pose where they could have one behind the back and the other in this action pose? Or at least one arm out of the way. Okay. Because the pose I want to do, if we're talking side view, we've got shoulder, not shoulder length back. Doopy-doopy-doo. Leaning into this part. torso, or shortened aggressively. I'm just roughing that in. So what I want to get is the arm pose. There we go. That's a face looking at us. It's a face probably too big, but it's at least looking at us finally. It's nice. Let's see. Ah, okay, so right. So the original pose had both arms coming forward like this. Dramatically holding. This was the one that was like head here, weapon there. That. I'm trying to think about the logic. So you would see under this arm. Oh, cheapers. And it would disappear behind the head. That. The one close to us would be non-threatening, or could be very threatening. Or reaching down to grab, perhaps. And if our bottom line of our image was only here, that would be way too close, which would be intimidating. Miquella in your personal space, we don't want that. Not when Miquella feeling murdery. So, okay. I realized, was I even talking for part of that, or was I just like muttering to myself vaguely? Well, in any case, sorry about that. We're working out the pose. We've got just a couple minutes left. So I want to have one go. I'm going to base it on this pose, I think. I think this gives us an interesting dynamic. But perhaps there's not really a way to have the arm over your head in a way that looks intimidating. Or behind it, I mean. It's always going to look a little bit silly. I don't know, that kind of works. Just trying not to overly obscure the face. This could be one place where the arm down and poised. The weapon. We've got options. So, let's have one go at a proper one. A proper full scale what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give that real low horizon line. I'm actually going to give a real distant vanishing point. I think that's what we ultimately need to have happen here. Okay, so we'll get this. More emphasis on the side. So we can clear this, make it more like this. No, it's more dynamic when we've got it all slightly angled. What we don't need is necessarily that the bottom is on screen. There we go. We can still have that. That will keep things exciting, keep things distant. Things like that. Okay. Now, for Miquella themselves, how do we want to do this? Because we've been looking at like shoulder view that pretty much entirely obscures the rest, which I'm on board with. Have we made this too dramatic by chance? Possibly. But I kind of doubt there's anything too dramatic. I think that this just needs to be angled more aggressively. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, looking at this pose. This. Sort of a thing going on. But the shoulders have to twist. More specifically, I shouldn't lock in the exact angle of the hips and stuff yet. I should stop doing this on the same layer as my perspective lines. Okay, let's do this not on the perspective line layer. That's been causing us too much grief today. It'd be silly to keep doing that. Okay. Keep that angled properly down. This is our shoulder. Or keep a vanishing point in mind, a vanishing point on this horizon line, way down here. Going to the same place. Yep, okay. Steeper's the way. No wonder that part looked off. There we go, that's looking better. If we were to do an arm, it goes like this. That particular reference, I remember hip is like actually here. Okay, there we go. This makes more sense to my head. Well, the arm would be, if it's like here, the arm would be bigger because it's going to tie into the whole darn shoulder. See the underside of it. See like a hand over there. Perhaps with the weapon visible behind. Perhaps with Miquella looking down at us. Hold on. Having some vanishing point problems there. There we go. You can see the top of the head, which is probably too much. So, instead, see the underside. There we go. And still rotate it to face us a little more, which is doable. Almost a straight line at this point. I feel like at this point, this arm ought to be, I kind of like that reaching down threateningly approach that we had there for a while. So we still want this line to be like that. Still want this line to be like that. It doesn't have to be our final pose, but it does have to be our final pose for today. And really, like, I'm assuming at this point that the actual bottom wouldn't be, if the horizon line's below the bottom of the piece, we would want this to be coming more directly at the viewer. They were grabbing. This other arm could potentially be visible. I'm trying to think of how visible that would be. That's basically doing is still like forward a bit. There we go. That works. This way we have one hand going towards the viewer. We have the very intense perspective from this outfit and everything. We have the other arm being raised up. Don't want to make it so that the face is actually looking more directly at the person. Not quite head on, but close. The solution to do that is to draw a square that mostly faces us and plays nice with these guidelines. More. Arm is what it is. Okay. Head. Going to be partly obscured in this view, too. There's just not an easy way. Well, actually, if we made this even more tilted, then we might be able to see the face more. It's funny. Really, really lean into that effect, huh? But it would also mean we could actually see the top of Miquella's head, which is kind of weird. Miquella would have to bend over at it. Well, I think this is certainly a good place to leave it for tonight. I think we're just gonna have to pick this one up tomorrow. I'll try, well, I'm not going to promise anything. I'm going to try to work through some of these poses and maybe find good reps for other ones too. Just so that we can come extra prepared for tomorrow. But otherwise, I think that's probably going to be it. I mean, this is certainly... Like, if our goal was just more dynamic, this is definitely more dynamic. It's less readable. Like, this angle is not readable at all with the arm, so we'd need to think about that. But perhaps... No, perhaps something more evenly spaced between torso and arms. Having one arm coming directly at us to grab. Other one. A little more visible still. Perhaps behind the head still. Or, at that particular angle. Perhaps we could even go back to this pose after all. Well, I think that's it for that. For tonight, we're already a little bit over time. Thank y'all for sticking around for that. We will pick this up again tomorrow, same time, same Twitch channel. If you want to look at any of the references or throw any other references my way, please feel free to do so. We've got the Pinterest live on that and the Discord if you want to chat. And otherwise, yeah, we're just going to keep on keeping on. I'm actually really, as much as it feels like we're just like fiddling around with different poses, I'm actually really excited with where this is going. Every single one of these poses feels better for this image and feels like a more exciting drawing than the previous one. Truth be told, we got so caught up in the composition last time that I was never really happy with it when we moved forward. And I think this was why. I think it's because we ended up with a very flat pose without me fully realizing it. So, this feels good. I'm excited about where this is going. I'm excited about the breakthroughs we had with faces on the last stream. I think we're actually in a really good, like a much better place to do this Miquella drawing than we were back in March. Olivine and Sifamir and my own other practice off a stream and all that have been paying off. So yeah, if you're feeling rusty on your art, obviously never a bad time to practice. Get out there and do it. Otherwise, I hope y'all have an excellent evening or morning, afternoon, night, 3 a.m., whenever it may happen to be. And I hope we see you next time. Have a good night, y'all.